how you doing? I read the most amazing rant, diatribe even, on Greco-Roman wrestling recently, and I thought I might share it with you. This is from the All England series book on wrestling by Walter Armstrong, who incidentally was a very interesting character. There's normally quite a wholesome reputation to these famous wrestlers, but Mr. Armstrong, known as Cross-Buttocker, was not quite as wholesome as some of the others. Anyway, he's got some opinions, and he's really not afraid to share them. And I can't think of anyone else like that. Let me find it for you. It's towards the end. He's talking about different styles of wrestling. And he talks a little about about Greco-Roman. And my goodness me, he does not like it at all. So here we go. Chapter 5 of Wrestling by Walter Armstrong as part of the All England series. The Greco-Roman fashion of wrestling is one of the most absurd and useless of all known systems, and might have been invented by some spiteful individual with the view of bringing a grand and useful exercise into disrepute. The whole thing is simply dogfighting on the ground, and may be classed as the biggest imposture that was ever foisted upon a long-suffering public in the guise of legitimate wrestling. He's not pulling any punches, is he? In what are still referred to as the palmy days of the ring, whenever an opponent was knocked down, he was allowed to get up again and renew the contest. But if he went to grass, in order to avoid, he was firstly cautioned, and if the cowardly offence was repeated, the delinquent was very properly disqualified. Unquestionably, this grovelling on the ground has assisted in ruining genuine wrestling in the metropolis, as many people think this mongrel fashion is the real Simon Pure. It becomes pretty clear that it's not necessarily Greco that he has a problem with, it's ground fighting. And that's also, pretty clear as you read through some of the rest of the book. But he goes on. Wherein lies the utility of Greco-Roman wrestling when the operators don't commence the struggle until they are down on all fours? The ancient Greek and Roman wrestlers were not in the habit of deliberately going down on the ground to avoid being thrown a fair backfall with two shoulders down. They struggled on their legs as long as they could and then battled for the mastery when unable longer to stand up in an erect position. But the exponents of the hybrid system now in vogue voluntarily visit the floor and commence a series of acrobatic gyrations which have no connection at all with wrestling proper. This kind of sounds like the way a lot of wrestlers talk about jiu-jitsu, doesn't it? This is something that I struggle with a little. We'll talk about it in another video, but I'm forcing myself to spend a lot of time playing guard, and that's a bit weird. Anyway, let's get back to dear old Cross-Buttocker, Walter Armstrong himself. A clause should be inserted in the rules to the effect that any wrestler going down without legitimately being thrown by his opponent should be disqualified, and if this mode of wrestling is to be continued, the sooner this clause is enforced, the better. The fact of a couple of strong young athletes having to throw themselves on the floor before making any attempt at a struggle is enough to condemn the whole practice. The rule against the use of the legs is a fatal objection to this style of wrestling, in which there exists nothing but weight and strength to battle with. From the earliest times, the legs have played a leading part in wrestling, a fact fully corroborated by the well-known Homeric lines describing the wrestling bout between Ulysses and Ajax. If you take away the clicks, back heels, etc. for preserving your own equilibrium and the chips and other manoeuvres used for grassing an opponent, there's very little left beyond weight and often untutored strength to proceed with. How many of the so-called music hall champions could survive through the first round in the wrestling ring at Grasmere, where tripping is in full swing? Undoubtedly, the Cumberland and Westmoreland style of wrestling with the arms around the body is the best of all known systems. That seems pretty opinionated. I love it though. You've got to give the guy some credit for being brave enough to stick to his opinions. Let's go. Undoubtedly, the Cumberland and Westmoreland style of wrestling with the arms round the body is the best of all known systems, as a man who can wrestle under northern rules can hold his own in any other imaginable fashion. The late Mr. George Stedman illustrated this fact in a particularly pronounced and emphatic manner during the last 30 years. Stedman was thoroughly well acquainted with the Greco-Roman style and floored the French giants Leboeuf and Dubois after the two foreigners had defeated both Jameson and Wright at the Agricultural Hall in 1870. He goes on to talk a little bit about technique. He basically says there are only two techniques in Greco and they're both a bit crap. I think that more than anything else, that chapter is a lovely view into the prejudices of a relatively well-known and relatively well-practiced and experienced Cumberland and Westmoreland wrestler. We'll talk more about Armstrong when I've finished doing some research on him, because I stumbled across something that was quite interesting. We'll cover it later. But anyway, this book, Wrestling, part of the All England series, is the book I've just photographed and given out to my supporters on Patreon. I don't know if you're aware, but you get access to all the previous stuff if you sign up to support me on Patreon. You can download all the books that I've scanned and put up in the past. There's only one paid post a month. Occasionally I make a mess of it and I put the paid post out a little bit too late or one a little bit too early, and you maybe get two a month, but it averages out at one a month. So yeah, if you want to support me, that's a great way to do it, and I'm going to give you something back in return. Anyway, well done to the fight team for making it to the end of the video, and I'll see you soon.